Jazz. People always say that the biggest lies are the easiest to believe. I never understood what that meant until the day I discovered my husband had been living a completely different life. Jazz. The hardest part wasn't finding out that he had another family. The hardest part was realizing that the man I loved had looked into my eyes every single day and lied without even blinking. Jazz. My name is Emma, and for 8 years, I believed I had the kind of marriage most people only dreamed about. If you had met us back then, you probably would have said we were the perfect couple. Jazz. We rarely argued, we laughed together, we planned our future together. Every Sunday morning, we would sit on our back porch with coffee in our hands, talking about places we wanted to visit one day. Jazz. Daniel always smiled when he spoke about the future. He made everything sound possible. I promise, he would tell me. One day we'll buy that little house near the lake you've always wanted. Jazz. I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? He had always been kind. He remembered birthdays. He brought flowers home for no reason. He kissed my forehead every morning before leaving for work. Jazz. Little things like that made me feel safe. Looking back now, I wonder if those little acts of love were real or just part of the role he had learned to play. At the time, I never questioned him. Jazz. Trust doesn't disappear overnight. It fades so slowly that you don't notice it happening. When we first met, I was 26 years old. I had just started working as an interior designer. Jazz. Trying to build a career from scratch. Life felt uncertain, but I was hopeful. Daniel walked into my life completely by accident. I was helping a friend decorate a charity event. Jazz. And he was there with one of the sponsors. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply smiled at me while I struggled to carry a heavy box. Need some help? He asked. Jazz. That simple question changed my entire life. He carried the box, then he stayed to help decorate. After the event ended, Jazz. We spent nearly 2 hours talking in an empty hall, while everyone else had already gone home. He listened more than he spoke. That made me feel seen. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. Jazz. He learned my favorite coffee order. He remembered little stories I had forgotten telling him. When I was nervous about a big project, Jazz. He stayed awake with me until 2 in the morning just to remind me I could do it. Nobody had ever believed in me like that. A year later, he proposed. There wasn't an expensive restaurant, no crowd. Jazz. No cameras, just the two of us sitting beside a quiet lake at sunset. He looked into my eyes and said something I'll never forget. I don't promise a perfect life, Jazz. I only promise you'll never have to face it alone. I cried before I even answered. Of course I said yes. Our wedding wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. The people we loved surrounded us. Jazz. Everyone kept saying how lucky we were to have found each other. I agreed. I truly believed I was the luckiest woman alive. The first few years of marriage felt exactly how I imagined they would. Jazz. We built routines. Friday night movies. Saturday grocery shopping. Sunday breakfasts on the porch. Life wasn't exciting every single day, but it felt peaceful. Jazz. And sometimes peace feels more valuable than excitement. Daniel worked as a regional sales manager. His job required travel. At least, that's what he always told me. Sometimes he was gone for 2 days. Jazz. Sometimes 4, once or twice, an entire week. It never bothered me. His company had grown quickly, and promotions came with responsibility. I was proud of him whenever he returned home. Jazz. He always brought me a small gift. A bookmark because I loved reading. A candle that smelled like vanilla. A handmade bracelet from a local market. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful. Jazz. I told my friends all the time how lucky I was. One afternoon, my best friend Rachel laughed while we were having lunch. You know, she said, Daniel has raised the standards for every husband. I smiled. I know. Rachel shook her head. I hope I find someone who looks at me the way he looks at you. Those words stayed with me. Back then, I thought they were true. Jazz. Now I know people only see what happens in public. Nobody sees the secrets waiting behind closed doors. About 5 years into our marriage, tiny things started changing. Not enough to scare me, Jazz. Just enough to confuse me. Daniel began keeping his phone face down. Whenever it buzzed, he'd glance at the screen before picking it up. Sometimes he'd step into another room to answer. When he came back, he'd smile. Just work. That explanation always sounded reasonable, so I accepted it. One evening, we were watching television together. His phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, stood up quickly, Jazz, and walked outside. I could see him through the living room window. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked worried when he returned 15 minutes later. I asked if everything was okay, Jazz. He kissed my forehead. Just a client making problems. I nodded. No more questions, because that's what trust looks like. You choose belief over doubt. Weeks passed, then months, Jazz. The business trips became more frequent. He started missing birthdays. Anniversaries became rush dinners instead of special evenings. Every time I asked if work was becoming too stressful, he apologized. "I'm doing this for us," he'd say. "I want us to have a better future." How do you argue with someone who claims they're sacrificing everything for your future? You don't. You support them, Jazz. So I did. I packed his bags, I ironed his shirts. I waited for him to come home. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the couch with the television still on, waiting to hear his key in the front door, Jazz. When he finally arrived, he'd apologize. "I'm sorry I'm late. It's okay, I missed you. I missed you too." Simple conversations, still lies. One rainy Thursday evening, Jazz. I decided to surprise him at work with his favorite dinner. He'd been working late all week. I thought it would make him smile. When I reached his office building, the receptionist looked confused. "Daniel," she repeated. "Yes." She frowned slightly. "He left around lunchtime." I smiled awkwardly. "Oh, maybe he forgot to tell me, probably." I thanked her and walked back to my car, Jazz. My heart felt strange, not broken, not suspicious, just unsettled. When I asked Daniel later that night, he didn't hesitate. "Oh, they moved my meetings to another branch, Jazz." His answer came so quickly that I never questioned it. I wanted to believe him. Sometimes love makes us ignore the questions we should be asking. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, Jazz, the distance between us grew, not because we stopped loving each other, because one of us had stopped telling the truth, and the other had no idea. One ordinary Saturday morning, Jazz, I decided to clean out the hallway closet while Daniel was away on another business trip. He'd called the night before. "I'll be home Monday. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too." His voice sounded warm, Jazz. Comforting. Exactly like always. As I reached for one of his winter jackets hanging in the closet, it slipped from the hanger and landed on the floor. Something fell out of the inside pocket, Jazz. It wasn't a wallet, it wasn't a receipt, it was a small photograph. I bent down and picked it up. At first I smiled, then my smile disappeared. It was Daniel, Jazz, standing beside a little girl no older than 6. His arm rested gently around her shoulders. Both of them were smiling. On the back of the photo, written in neat blue handwriting, Jazz, were 4 words that made my hands begin to shake. "Love you forever, Daddy." My heart stopped. I stared at those words again and again, hoping they would somehow change. But they didn't, Jazz. And in that terrifying moment, for the very first time in 8 years, I realized my perfect marriage might never have existed at all, Jazz. People think the worst part of betrayal is discovering the truth. It isn't. The worst part is spending every minute afterward wondering how many lies you believed without ever questioning them, Jazz. I sat on the bedroom floor for what felt like hours. staring at the photograph. The little girl's smile was so genuine. She looked happy, safe, loved, and Daniel, he wasn't standing beside her like a family friend. He looked exactly the way he looked in every picture we had together. Relaxed, proud, protective. Only this time, I wasn't the woman standing next to him. My hands trembled as I turned the picture over again. Love you forever, Daddy. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she was his niece, Maybe a friend's daughter. Maybe someone had written Daddy as a joke. I repeated those excuses in my mind until they sounded almost believable. Almost. When Daniel came home on Monday evening, he hugged me as if nothing had changed. I missed you, he said with a smile. I missed you too, I replied. It was the first lie I had ever told him. I didn't mention the photograph. Instead, I watched him, every movement, every expression, every word. That night, he placed his phone on the bedside table before going to shower. Normally, I would never touch it. Not because he had forbidden me, because I trusted him, but trust had cracked. The screen lit up, a message appeared. Emily, she keeps asking when you'll visit again. Before I could read anything else, the screen locked. Emily, I had never heard that name before. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, he picked up his phone almost immediately. His eyes met mine for just a second. You okay? He asked. I forced a smile, just tired. He kissed my forehead and climbed into bed. Within minutes, he was asleep. I wasn't. The next morning, after he left for work, I opened our laptop. Daniel had once logged into his email on it. He had forgotten to sign out. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Opening it felt wrong. It felt like crossing a line. But then I remembered the photograph. I remembered the message. I clicked. Most of his emails were ordinary. Work reports, flight confirmations, hotel bookings, nothing unusual. Then I noticed one folder labeled personal. Inside was a hotel reservation from 2 weeks earlier. Only one thing caught my attention: the city. It wasn't where he had told me he was traveling. It was a town nearly 200 miles away, a place we had never visited together. There were no business meetings there, no company office, just one small hotel. I wrote down the address. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything else. Questions raced through my mind. Who was Emily? Why had he lied about the city? And who was the little girl in the photograph? By Friday morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Daniel. Not yet. I needed answers first. So I drove to the town listed on the reservation. The 2-hour drive felt endless. Every mile made my heart beat faster. When I reached the hotel, I parked across the street. I had no real plan. I simply waited. An hour passed, then another. Just as I was beginning to think I had made a mistake, a familiar black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Daniel stepped out. For a moment, I almost smiled. It was strange how comforting it felt just to see him. Then a woman walked toward him. She was around my age. She smiled warmly. Daniel smiled back, not the polite smile he gave strangers. The smile I thought belonged only to me. She hugged him, not like an old friend, like someone who had been waiting for him. I felt my chest tighten, but it wasn't over. A little girl ran out of the hotel lobby. Daddy! The word echoed across the parking lot. Daniel bent down, lifted her into his arms, and laughed, exactly the way he had always laughed with our nieces. She wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. I missed you, she said. I missed you too, sweetheart, he replied. Those were the same words he had spoken to me 4 days earlier. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't watching my husband. I was watching a father who had never told me he had a daughter. I stayed in my car frozen. The woman reached for Daniel's hand. He held it naturally, without hesitation. They walked inside together, like a family, like they had done it 100 times before. Tears rolled down my face, not because he loved someone else, Jazz, because he had lived an entire life without me knowing it. How many weekends, how many birthdays, how many anniversaries had he spent here instead of where he claimed to be, Jazz? I had spent years defending him, making excuses for him, believing every story, and all that time, he had been building another home. I wanted to drive away, pretend I had never seen any of it. Instead, Jazz. I waited nearly 3 hours later. The woman left the hotel with the little girl. Daniel stayed behind. As they walked toward a nearby playground, I quietly followed from a distance. Jazz. The little girl laughed as she chased pigeons. The woman watched her with a gentle smile. She didn't look like someone hiding a terrible secret. She looked happy, almost peaceful. Jazz. That realization confused me more than anything. What if she didn't know about me? What if she believed she was the only wife? The thought sent a chill through my body. Jazz. Could we both be victims of the same lie? As they sat on a park bench, I gathered every bit of courage I had left. I walked toward them. The woman looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you, Jazz?" For a moment I couldn't speak, then I looked at the little girl. She smiled innocently. "Hi." My heart broke. I smiled back. "Hi." Turning to the woman, I asked quietly, "Are you Emily?" She nodded. "Yes." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry to ask something strange." She waited patiently. "How do you know Daniel?" Her smile grew wider. "Oh, Daniel is my husband." The world seemed to stop. Jazz. She said it so naturally, so confidently. There wasn't even a hint of doubt in her voice. My knees felt weak. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "What did you say?" She frowned. I looked directly into her eyes. "Jazz, my name is Emma." There was a long silence. Then I said the words neither of us would ever forget. "I'm Daniel's wife." Emily's smile disappeared. She stared at me. Then she laughed nervously. "Jazz, that's not funny." "I wish it was." I reached into my purse. Slowly, I pulled out my wallet. Inside was a photograph from our wedding day. Daniel and I stood together, smiling at the camera. Jazz. The date was clearly printed in the corner. Emily took the picture with shaking hands. Her face turned pale. She looked from the photograph to me, and back again. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "No." A tear slid down her cheek. "No, he told me his first marriage ended years ago." Neither of us spoke. The little girl looked up at us, confused. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Jazz. Emily couldn't answer. Neither could I. In that heartbreaking moment, I realized something I had never expected. Daniel hadn't destroyed just one family. He had destroyed two. Jazz. And for the first time since finding the photograph, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let him invent another lie. Jazz. I was going to uncover every secret he had buried, because the truth wasn't finished with him yet. The drive home felt longer than it had that morning. My hands rested tightly on the steering wheel. Jazz. But my mind was somewhere else. Every memory I had shared with Daniel replayed itself like scenes from an old movie. The vacations, the birthdays, the promises. Jazz. Even the ordinary evenings on our couch suddenly felt different. For years I had believed I knew the man sleeping beside me. Now I wasn't sure I had ever known him at all. Jazz. I cried for nearly an hour after I walked through my front door. Not because I still hoped the truth would disappear, but because I finally accepted that it wouldn't. When the tears stopped, Jazz, something inside me changed. I realized that anger would only cloud my judgment. If Daniel had spent years creating two separate lives, Jazz, then he was probably prepared with another lie if I confronted him too soon. I needed facts, not guesses, not emotions. Facts the next evening, Jazz. Daniel returned home carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. "I saw these on the way home," he said with a smile. "They reminded me of you." A week earlier, those flowers would have melted my heart, Jazz. Now they only reminded me how easily kindness could hide deception. I thanked him, placed the flowers in a vase, and carried on with dinner as if nothing had changed, Jazz. He talked about another busy week at work, another possible business trip, another demanding client. His stories sounded polished, almost rehearsed. For the first time, Jazz, I noticed how carefully he avoided specific details. Whenever I asked a simple question, he answered with something vague before changing the subject. It had probably happened for years, Jazz. I had simply never noticed. Over the next several days, I quietly began organizing everything I already knew. I wrote dates on a calendar, his business trips, the hotel reservation, the photograph, Jazz. The afternoon I had seen him with Emily and the little girl. Seeing everything together revealed a pattern. Many of his work trips matched weekends and holidays. Days he had claimed he couldn't be home, Jazz. Days I had spent alone, believing he was working hard for our future. One afternoon, my best friend Rachel invited me to lunch. The moment she saw me, she frowned. "You don't look like yourself, Jazz." "I've just been tired," I replied. She studied my face for a second. "You know you can tell me anything." For a brief moment I almost did, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I smiled softly. "Jazz, I promise I will." Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Whatever happened next, I knew I wouldn't have to face it alone. That thought gave me strength. Later that week, Jazz, I met Emily again at a quiet cafe. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. She looked exhausted. "I barely slept," she admitted. "I didn't either, Jazz." She placed a folder on the table. "I found these." Inside were photographs, greeting cards, and copies of travel confirmations. Every piece fit together with the timeline I had been building, Jazz. Daniel hadn't just lied. He had carefully divided his life into two worlds that were never supposed to meet. Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. I thought I knew him. So did I, Jazz. Neither of us blamed the other. We both understood the same painful truth. The lies belonged to one person, not to us. Before leaving, Emily quietly said something that stayed with me. "Jazz, no matter what happens, I don't want my daughter to grow up surrounded by more lies." I nodded. "Neither do I." From that moment on, our goal became clear. We weren't trying to hurt Daniel, Jazz. We were trying to make sure the truth finally had a voice. Back at home, I gathered every document that belonged to our marriage. Financial records, purported papers, insurance documents. Nothing dramatic, Jazz. Nothing secretive, just the paperwork every married couple keeps. As I reviewed everything, I noticed several expenses I had never questioned before. Hotel charges, monthly transfers, Jazz. Small payments that had blended into ordinary household finances. Individually, they seemed harmless. Together, they told a story. For years, I had trusted every explanation, Jazz. Now I understood why the numbers had never made sense. Late that night, Daniel walked into the living room. "You've been quiet lately," he said, "just thinking." He sat beside me. "Is everything okay, Jazz?" I looked into his eyes. For years, I had believed those eyes could never lie. Now I wondered how many times they already had. I smiled gently. "I'm just tired, Jazz." He accepted the answer without another question. The irony almost made me laugh. The man who had hidden an entire family from me hadn't noticed that his own wife had changed, Jazz. He kissed my forehead and went upstairs. I remained on the couch, staring out the window. The moonlight reflected across the glass, and for the first time in days, I felt calm, Jazz. Not because the pain was gone, because I finally knew what I needed to do. I wasn't going to argue, I wasn't going to shout, and I certainly wasn't going to let emotions decide what happened next, Jazz. The truth was stronger than any accusation. Soon, Every lie Daniel had carefully built would stand beside the facts. When that day came, he wouldn't be able to explain them away. He wouldn't be able to convince either of us that we had misunderstood. His two separate worlds were already beginning to collide. And this time, there would be nowhere left for the truth to hide. Daniel's birthday arrived with an unusual sense of calm. For weeks I had carried the weight of his secret alone. Now I was ready to put it down. That evening, our house was filled with family and close friends. His parents laughed with the guests, his co-workers shared stories, and Daniel greeted everyone with the same warm smile that had fooled me for 8 years. He looked happy, confident, untouchable. After dinner, he raised a glass. I just want to thank everyone for being here, he said. I'm lucky to have such amazing people in my life. Everyone applauded. I stood up slowly. Before we cut the cake, I said, I'd like to say something too. Daniel smiled at me, expecting a heartfelt birthday speech. Instead, I walked to the television and connected my laptop. The room grew quiet. The first image on the screen was our wedding photo. Guests smiled as they remembered that beautiful day. Then I changed the slide. A photograph of Daniel holding a little girl appeared. Across the screen were the words written on the back of the picture. Love you forever, Daddy. The smiles disappeared. Daniel's face turned pale. What is this? His brother asked. I took a deep breath. It's the truth. Just then, the front door opened. Emily walked inside, holding her daughter's hand. The room fell completely silent. Daniel whispered her name, but she ignored him. She stood beside me. My name is Emily, she said softly. For 6 years I believed Daniel was my husband. Gasps filled the room. His mother covered her mouth in shock. His father stared at Daniel, unable to speak. Daniel quickly stepped forward. I can explain. I calmly placed a folder on the table. Inside were hotel receipts, travel records, photographs, and messages. Every piece of evidence showing how he had lived 2 separate lives. I didn't want anyone to believe only my words, I said. So I brought the facts, one by one. The guests looked through the documents. No one argued. No one defended him. The evidence spoke louder than any excuse. Emily looked directly at Daniel. When were you planning to tell me about Emma? He lowered his head. She asked another question. And when were you planning to tell Emma about us? Again, silence. His father finally spoke. I don't recognize the man standing in front of me. Those words hurt Daniel more than any accusation. I slowly removed my wedding ring. For years it had been a symbol of love and trust. Now it only reminded me of promises built on lies. I placed it on the table beside the evidence. I'm not here to ruin your life, I said quietly. I'm here because everyone deserves the truth. No one celebrated, no one shouted. There was only silence, the kind that comes when every lie finally falls apart. As the guests quietly left the house, Daniel remained standing alone. For the first time in years, he had nowhere left to hide. The truth had finally been seen by everyone.